Anyway, continuing with another story. Speaking of aviation, so for those who are familiar with Boeing's new launch of the 737 Max airplane, sorry. But sad to say, had some hiccups along the way in terms of two significant crashes in the past, I think 2 3 years, way back in 2018 or 2019. I think so. And that led to the halt of all of its airlines being stopped, parked in the runway. That was even before the pandemic, which was last year, right? 2020. So, what was the repercussion of the air crash? Well, it was found out that it was nothing. It was, I won't say intentional, but there was a flaw in their airplane, and the management or the administration still pursued uh, neglect. Is a keyword I think I would appropriately use in terms of mismanagement of allowing a major flaw, a technical flaw in a sense that they allowed it to continue to prosper, or it wasn't addressed in a timely manner. So lives were lost because of this, and it took two crashes before the entire 737, whole fleet were stopped from flying, from causing more damages. And obviously, the United States Department of Justice had already sued the company, and they were fined more than 2.5 billion in terms of fines and compensation. So after reaching a settlement with the Department of Justice, as mentioned, and it killed almost 350 people, meaning from the two flights that I mentioned. Now, 2.5 billion may seem a big amount for many people, but I think the amount is considerably small in terms of the repercussions that it did, not taking into account the lives that were taken because of this neglect, and it wasn't by accident, and it was a choice by said company in terms of trying to compete with, obviously, Boeing is not just the main player in the airline industry, that you have also Airbus, and it all stems from competition, right? Airbus released a new flagship airlines, so in turn Boeing had to go toe to toe. And the problem with the airline industry is, if you need to build a new fleet of airplanes, it takes a long process from the certifications and so forth. So what they did is use the existing platform that they have and installed, newer engine, so to speak, which is more, they would call it more efficient, can travel farther, not faster, travel farther and more fuel efficient, which they didn't take into account the other, I won't say eccentricities, but the difficulty of certifying an actual airplane. And obviously, there was a particular, they call it the M car. I forgot the term. Which what was it called? Is it the modified? Wait, let me see here. Yeah, it's called the maneuvering characteristic augmented system. It's sort of a stabilizing trim. So it's a device, or it's a software that automatically tries to stabilize the airplane. If there's turbulence, if it's dipping down, it tries to automatically dip up. But there were problems that the pilot could not manually overtake the airplane in a sense, which caused the crash. And the problem here is there was no proper training for the pilots to handle certain situations, like in this case in the M car. And obviously, the company sought to bypass the actual proper training process, going to the simulation and learning the process, all of the different scenarios, so that if a situation like this do occur, they could avoid it and save people's lives. And in terms of trying to save on cost, the repercussion was the cost of losing more lives than necessary. Anyway, so just to recap, the case was, the investigation almost ran for almost 2 years. So let's see here. Yeah, so it ran for 21 months, which led to the design and the development of what was the problem, of what caused the crash for the 737 MAX, both in Ethiopia and in India back in 2018 and 2019 respectively. So let's see here. So the crash exposed primarily fraudulent and deceptive conduct by the employees, meaning one of the world's leading commercial airplane manufacturers. So they tried to cover up what was the problem with the airplane, and in terms of expediting the process, they made it difficult for the FAA to corroborate or to easily find out what was the issue altogether here. Now, obviously, according to uh, according to Mr. Burns, Boeing employees obviously chose the path of profit over candor. So it's not just the employees. I think management were at fault here because at the end of the day, they have to make the decision. It's not the employees who makes the big decision by concealing material information from the FAA, as mentioned, concerning the operation of the 77 MAX here. And also engaging in effort to cover up the deception. And obviously, the crashes triggered a hailstorm from the US leadership in terms of the cost of Boeing for some around $20 billion. Now, obviously, Congress has already passed a policy, not a policy, a legislation informing or reforming how FAA certifies the new airplanes here. Now, obviously, it's not just the rules that protects the citizen, but also the severity of the penalty that should be levied on such companies that that make rash decisions in terms of you know prioritizing profit over the safety, especially your product is very crucial to people's lives in terms of traveling from one place to another. If they depend upon it, then your product is not reliable. There are faults to begin with, and you still use those products for public consumption, which is kind of terrible if you think about it. And obviously, many people have stated that, like in this case, the settled amount, is constitute a slap on the wrist, and it's an insult to the many victims who died on as a result of corporate greed. Now, this is according to the Representative Peter DeFazio, chairman of House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And that's why 2.5 billion seems nothing if you think about it in the long scheme of things, because those businesses can recuperate, but families' lives are shattered in terms of losing unnecessarily family members because of negligence from said company. And obviously, the dollar amount of the settlement is a mere fraction of Boeing's annual revenue, which is true. The settlement cites that any real accountability in terms of criminal charges, which is the biggest problem here. Who will be held accountable? Is it the CEO, the board of directors, or everyone concerned? Now, obviously, there were no criminal charges that was pressed, and in terms of the worst that could happen, they fired their CEO and replaced it with another one, and then they move on from this debacle and go from there. Now, whether that's fair or not, it is what it is. And obviously, the main issue here is that the U.S. airplane manufacturer was charged with one count of conspiracy to defraud, and it also faces a 3-year deferred prosecution prosecution agreement, sorry, with the charge dismissed if it completes those requirements. So, which is kind of unfair if you think about it, paying a penalty, then you go scot-free with nothing in return, and it doesn't. Hopefully, it doesn't happen again, but it keeps on happening because if no stiff penalty that's severe enough that it will deter people, in this case companies, from doing such shady practices or foregoing the safety of many people over profit, you know it's a long ways to go. And obviously, the deception here goes way beyond. As mentioned, that the document states that the two of its technical pilots deceived the FAA about the safety system, as mentioned regarding the MCAS, where both fatalities was caused by this system. Again, the stabilizer, which was supposed to be done automatically, but when the pilot tried to take control of the airplane, they were not able to do so, which led to those two crashes. And if they had the proper training to begin with, it would have saved a lot of trouble from a lot of people, and those people's lives who were lost would still be here by today. Right? And Boeing belatedly cooperated. Belatedly, huh? How fun is that? After initially frustrating the investigators. So again, appropriately acknowledges that how they fell short of their values. Well, that's after the fact, right? It's always, a PR stunt of saying sorry, but after the fact that you did it intentionally, not by accident. It's one thing to make a mistake by accident. It's another when you decidedly pursue this train of thought. Now, obviously, according to the Justice Department, as stated, the 243 million fine which was levied to the company regarding the sentencing guideline, it was considered a low end. So why not charge them more? Because they can afford it, right? If you can charge 200 million, why not charge them 2 billion, right? Because I don't think 200 million constitutes the lives of those, you know, 200, 300 or so passengers that was lost, right? And it could have cost, the same amount for Boeing to implement the full flight simulator, and that would have saved lives, right? And obviously, at the end of the day, according to Michael Stumo, one of the whose daughter died in the Max air crash, the settlement is a protection for Boeing rather than justice. Obviously, Boeing is one of the major manufacturers of airplanes in the United States. There's no other competing US brand, only Airbus, which is based in Europe. So it's a continuation of Boeing evading accountability and transparency. Again, at the end of the day, it's up to consumers whether you want to patronize, Boeing's airplanes or whoever purchases them in the future and so forth. Time will only tell if Boeing learned their lesson. Hopefully not. This will not ever happen again for our sake, right?